Welcome to The Quantum State, a podcast exploring the latest research and innovation in quantum computing. Join us as we dive into groundbreaking breakthroughs, trends, and news shaping the quantum landscape. Discover the cutting-edge developments pushing the boundaries of computing technology. Through insightful discussions, expert interviews, and in-depth analysis, we unravel the intricate theories and real-world applications driving this transformative field. The Quantum State also offers updates from BTQ, sharing the company's research progress and innovative products at the forefront of quantum computing. So, embark on this mind-bending journey with us as we navigate the realm of quantum computing, witnessing its potential to revolutionize our world. Welcome to the Quantum State. Quantum computers, when scaled larger than we have today, could potentially break RSA and elliptic curve cryptography using an algorithm called Shor's algorithm, and even significantly weaken AES cryptography. Therefore, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, has launched the Post-Quantum Cryptography PQC Competition to look for new cryptographic schemes. Recently, it was announced that NIST has selected BTQ's post-quantum cryptography scheme, Prion, in the first round for consideration in their PQC standardization process. Today, we have Chen-Mou from the Prion team on the Quantum State podcast to answer questions for us about the NIST competition, the threat of quantum computers to cryptography, and awesome technical details behind the Prion post-quantum cryptography scheme itself. So let's go around and introduce everyone.
Hi everyone, I'm Peter Rohde and I'm an academic at University of Technology, Sydney, focusing on quantum cryptography and quantum computing.
I'm Gavin Brennan, professor of physics, just outside of Sydney, Macquarie University, and I also work on quantum computing and quantum simulations.
Hi, I'm Chen-Mou. I'm the chief cryptographer at BTQ and also kind of a member of the Prion team. Nice seeing everyone here.
And I'm Anastasia Marchinkova. I've been part of the quantum space for about 15 years, from quantum telecom and now to security. So the first question I have for you is, can you provide an overview of the NIST PQC competition, its purpose, and the significance in the context of quantum computing? And why do we really need this right now anyway?
Sure. So I guess since we're here in this podcast, most of us are aware that, as Anastasia mentioned, large quantum computers can break today's public key crypto fairly easily. And that's why we need it, because public key crypto is behind our daily lives. Like whenever you go to a website using HTTPS, that's public key crypto at work. So therefore, it's important that we have a secure public key crypto, even when we have large quantum computers. And that's why NIST has started, I think, around 2016 officially to launch this competition. And the purpose is to select quantum secure public key crypto so that we can still have confidential communication and all these security that we enjoy today in the face of large quantum computers. So I think I want to make it clear that NIST has already selected 4 algorithms last year, including 3 digital signature algorithms and 1 CAM, so-called key encapsulation mechanisms. So they will be standardized maybe in the next few years. But somehow, for some reason, NIST feels that we will elaborate this later, maybe. But NIST feels that we want to have more eggs in more baskets, so to speak, to kind of amortize the risk that some of the algorithms might be broken in the next couple of years. And that's why NIST is having an additional round of competition. And that's where Prion is in currently. So we've passed the kind of the first screening stage. So we're among 40-ish submissions and that's being considered to be standardized as a digital signature algorithm.
When NIST wants to standardize an algorithm like this, clearly they want to set the bar very high. What are the criteria that they use to decide what constitutes a good scheme for consideration?
That's a good question. So obviously, security is always the top priority. It doesn't make sense to go all the to work so hard, and at the end we just arrive at the algorithm that's broken, or that can be broken by some adversary. So security is always the top priority here. In this context, especially security against large quantum computers. But having said that, this kind of public key crypto will be deployed across a very wide range of applications, ranging from small devices, IoT kind of devices, your refrigerator, for example, all the way to servers in the data centers, PC, smartphones, everywhere. And so therefore, performance is also an important consideration. And aside from that, there are other kind of factors, like whether the development and also the standardization process itself. Of course, it would be nice. It would be ideal that these are transparent and trustworthy, so that nobody can kind of sneak in a backdoor somewhere. I think those are kind of the criteria that NIST is using to evaluate, to carry out the competition, also to evaluate the submissions.
Yeah, I'd love to dive a little deeper into that and talk about more of these technical considerations and designs, because I believe one of the candidates that was released was broken by classical systems. So it's funny, sometimes you think about the quantum side of it, you're designing for the quantum side, but you still have to have it stand up against classical systems as well. So can you go deeper into those considerations?
Sure. So I'm sure that Peter here can correct me if I'm saying something wrong here, but right now, most of us believe that the class of problems that can efficiently solved by quantum computer and classical computer, they're kind of they're not really disjoint, but on the other hand, one doesn't contain the other strictly. So there's some intersection there. And therefore, even if we have a problem that the quantum computer, even a large quantum computer, cannot solve efficiently, that doesn't mean that we cannot break it on classical computers. So in other words, a PQC algorithm really needs to resist attacks from both classical and quantum computers. So I think that's a kind of a bit implied in the NIST evaluation criteria. When they say security, they mean both against classical and quantum computers. So you're right. Some of the first, among all these 40-ish submissions, I believe it's more than one, have been broken by classical computers, obviously, because we don't yet have such large quantum computers. And we cryptographers today tend to spend more time on kind of checking whether these proposals can be broken by classical algorithms, because we're kind of more familiar with classical attacks. And that's really, I feel that's a bit, we can do better there by inviting more experts like Peter and Gavin, analyze all these algorithms from quantum computing's perspective. Ideally, we want to be able to have higher confidence against quantum computers, because that's the kind of the game here.
Yeah, so just following up on that a little bit, what are the challenges and trade-offs between achieving quantum resistance and maintaining efficiency and practicality for these schemes?
That's also $1 million question. So I guess, in an ideal world, of course, we want to have our cake and eat it. But so far, at least in all the non-algorithms, all the algorithms that I know of, it seems that we need to pay some price here. We don't have a really ideal post-quantum algorithm like ECC, which has small footprints, quite efficient, in terms of computational cost, and there's a beautiful algebraic structure that we kind of, I say we have a very good understanding of the algebraic structure there, and therefore we have a fairly high confidence on the security. But that I guess when it comes to post-quantum crypto, we're still there's still a lot of work that we need to do, and we haven't had any post-quantum algorithms that's as good as ECC. So most of them we need to pay a price. Either we have a larger key, or we have a larger ciphertext, and sometimes both, or they tend to be slow. So I'd say that's something we need to work on, and that's really challenging. But on the other hand, as a cryptographer, I think that means, and also quantum computing experts, I think that's a job security for us. So that's definitely a good thing for us.
Is there a cap theorem for PQC schemes already, or is that more?
Not yet, but there's a kind of folklore, I would say. It's also kind of a holy grail whether we can have a post-quantum crypto algorithm that's just remotely as good as ECC, that kind of good balance, small footprint, fast. We're still in search for that. But that's a good idea. Maybe someone should come up with a CAPS theorem or the equivalent for PQC.
Definitely free theorist idea. So I'd like to dive deeper into Prion itself. So most of the solutions that were released before were based on lattice problems. So why do you think that was, and how does Prion differ from the other schemes that have been released in the competition so far?
Right, that's also a good question. So obviously, I'm biased. I believe that, of course, the lattice problems seem very hard. It's well studied. It's under intensive research for decades, and I believe that it's a plausible candidate for post-quantum crypto. But looking back, looking at the last year's selection, NIST has already selected 3 algorithms based on lattice problem, based on the hardness of certain lattice problems. So I think from a perspective of diversity, I think we really want to select, or we really want to have some PQC based on a different assumption. And that's where we feel that systems like Prion can be a good idea, because we don't rely on any hardness results from lattice-based crypto. So that kind of, so if you go to NIST classification, Prion is classified under the other category. It's not the so there are several categories like lattice-based, multivariate, etc. But Prion is other.
Could you explain a little bit more about what these different principles are? These lattice-based crypto systems, they're all based on this one concept of lattices, a particular mathematical concept. What is the alternate concept that Prion relies on? And what is it about that gives us some kind of confidence that it's robust against both classical and quantum attacks?
That's a very big question. So I will try my best to kind of give a summary first, and maybe we can elaborate on this later on. So first of all, Prion security doesn't depend on any hard problems in lattice, but we do rely on a secure hash function. So that's what we use there mostly. And in addition, we also assume some problems, maybe not problems. So we assume that certain codes, certain error correcting codes behave nicely in some sense. So we're saying that these codes, when you look at them statistically, they should behave nicely so that we can have some kind of assurance, and that's all we need for Prion. So I guess that's nice in a sense that I think almost in all digital signature schemes, you need to assume you have a secure hash function, without which I just can't imagine we cryptographers can do any work, right? We kind of need a hash function anyway. And beyond that, I think error correcting codes, I mean, coding theory, mathematicians have been studying for at least 50 years, if not more. And we kind of understand, at least from what I read in the literature, there's tons of research, and we kind of know roughly how they behave. So I think I believe that we are basing Prion's security on a more solid foundation, and this is definitely my personal opinion, because Lattice, again, people putting a lot of effort there, but it's still relatively young. We kind of started looking into the hardness of this lattice problem maybe in the last 20 years. Yeah, so compared with 50, 60 years of research in coding theory, I think that's still there's a lot of catch up that the lattice researchers need to do.
Just quickly to jump in, I think on the hash function. So I get a lot of questions on my content about about Bitcoin mining, and that's based on hash functions. And people try and gotcha with the idea of, well, there's Grover's algorithm, that could potentially, speed up the search space, right? And so how good is that assumption? I personally, when I looked into it, I'm like, yes, Grover's can theoretically do this, but we haven't figured out yet how to actually encode these sort of hash functions onto the Grover's algorithm and actually practically do this. Is that kind of where your assumption lies as well, or am I completely off base?
Yes and no, but that's also true. It's certainly quite challenging to encode a hash function into a quantum computer. We don't know how many. Well, we kind of have various estimates on how much resource you need there. It's definitely not an easy job. But on top of that, there's from some theoretical viewpoint, there's a fundamental gap between what Shor's algorithm can accelerate versus what Grover's algorithm can accelerate, right? So because we're talking about the difference between a polynomial and a super polynomial exponential speedup for Shor's algorithm, there, I guess my intuition is that with Shor's algorithm, it doesn't really make sense to use RSA or ECC at all, because no matter how fast you can compute this algorithm, the attacker will always be able to come up with roughly the same order of magnitude speed up. So it doesn't really matter how long the key that you're using, they're going to catch up with you fairly soon. On the other hand, for Grover's algorithm, the speed up there is not exponential. Therefore, we might need to increase, say, the output from a hash function. We need to increase the key length for a symmetric key crypto like AES. But that kind of solves the problem, so to speak. That's in my opinion, that's kind of sufficient to resist the attack from large quantum computers. So there's also this fundamental gap between the speed up offered by Grover's versus Shor's algorithm. I think that's why we love this idea of basing our proposal security on the security of a hash function.
I guess it's also worth mentioning that in the context of the speed up that Grover provides for hashes and AES, for example, the overhead you need in increasing your key size is just equivalent to doubling it in effect. If you get a quadratic speed up from Grover's algorithm, you only have to double the size of your hash or your key. And that's a very modest thing to absorb. It's not a big deal.
Yes, exactly. I think Peter is the quantum expert here. So maybe we should have asked this question to Peter.
Yeah, so on the announcement, it mentioned that Prion only requires say, a few tens of bits for both the public and private keys. How did you manage to achieve such a small key size without compromising security?
Yeah, so the secret is assume that AES is secure because our public key and private key are essentially the ciphertext and the plaintext, ciphertext and the key of an AES encryption, so to speak. So we also need to assume that AES is secure and will remain secure under the attack of large quantum computers, and that's why we can have such small keys. Which is, I think, we believe that NIST and the crypto community have done a great job designing, selecting, and analyzing AES. So we have very high confidence on that. And besides, we would really be in a much serious trouble if AES were to be broken by quantum computers. So we're kind of hoping that will not happen.
And so how does Prion compare to the key sizes used today, the non-post-quantum secure?
You mean the non-post-quantum public key crypto?
Yeah, just comparing Prion to existing.
Yeah, so I think in our proposal, it's really comparable to ECC at the same security level. So we're not much larger or smaller, roughly the same.
Okay.
When it comes to these systems, people often forget that nobody actually has a proof of the security of any of these cryptographic protocols. Literally none of them have a proof of security. It's always based on some assumptions. What are those assumptions in the case of Prion compared to other schemes, and what does that imply for their relative security or the strength of the statement about their relative security?
That's also a very good question. So as we have discussed, so we assume, like everybody else, we have access to a secure hash function, and we assume certain error correcting codes behave kind of to our favor, so that we. But I think that's a mild assumption, and people are looking into that. And in addition to that, we assume that AES is secure even under quantum computers attack. So we'd say that this is kind of really a minimum set of assumptions that pretty much anybody, I mean, aside from the assumption on error correcting codes, but these are kind of really close to minimal assumptions that a lot of cryptographers have relied on to do their work. So compare with Prion, so most other schemes, maybe except the MPC and symmetric key based schemes. So like multivariate schemes, they need to rely, in addition to having a secure function, that the certain problems, for example, the problem of solving a nonlinear system of equations over a finite field, that's hard. So that problem is hard in general. And for lattice, we have discussed that the certain lattice problem, like finding a short vector in a high dimensional lattice, is hard. That kind of additional assumption are required in a lot of other proposals. So that's the first kind of a comparison of Prion versus kind of other kinds of public key crypto PQC proposals here. But on the other hand, it's very difficult to compare the kind of these assumptions. So these are assumptions about different problems. Sometimes completely different problems. So it's hard to say which is more likely to hold or which one is more secure in that sense. Because if your assumption holds, then at least the argument is that then the proposed algorithm is secure. And so that is hard to compare. It's like comparing apple with oranges. So people there, like I did, use all kinds of heuristics. So often we tend to think that if a problem has been studied for a longer time, then it tends to be, we kind of feel that we understand it better. So that's probably a more valid assumption, or that's probably makes the resulting design a bit more secure. And of course, you want to minimize the number of assumptions you make, because the more assumptions you make, the more likely that one of them can be broken. So I would say, in this regard, so when we look at the problem from this angle, we're really using a minimum set of well understood assumptions. So I think that's a design philosophy behind Prion.
These particular assumptions that you're making in the cryptographic community, these are considered very, very strong ones.
Yeah,
the security of hash
functions. Yes, it's considered very strong, and frankly, we don't have a very good proof, in the sense of a mathematical proof that these hash functions, or AES, symmetric key block ciphers, are really secure against quantum computers. These are really kind of, if you put it mildly, kind of an ad hoc assumption. It's based on the fact that a lot of us have spent a lot of time working on this, and we haven't figured out how to do it. It's kind of the best effort argument. But I guess when it comes to symmetric key crypto, it's really very few alternatives. So that are practical. So of course we can build symmetric key crypto systems from some hardness. From the hardness of certain mathematical problems. There we will have a more formal proof, if you will. But all the resulting designs, I know they're impractical, so you would not want to use it in practice. So that's kind of a bit unfortunate. That's the state of the art. But yes, Peter, you're right. This is a strong assumption, and we really need a lot more experts like yourself, quantum computing experts, to really look into this assumption and try to break, for example, hash functions on quantum computer. And I think that would be of tremendous help to the crypto community in general.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I think maybe there's not such an incentive to, as a quantum computing researcher, to try to do it because, for example, if you're a PhD student, you might start on the projects and the result could be no-go. Like you don't find it. So
yeah,
there's no story in that.
Yeah,
do you have any thoughts on what might be fruitful avenues for people in the quantum computing community to look at? Like I seem to recall a paper on lattice-based post-quantum secure cryptography being cast as solving a linear system of equations, which was a sparse matrix representation. So it made me wonder if there would be like an HHL algorithm type of attack. But I'm sure people have thought about such things. But do you have any suggestions on where the quantum community might want to look to attack such things?
Yeah, that's also a very good question. I think there's usually you need to study so much, as a starting graduate student or PhD student, in order to get into one field, for example, quantum computing. And then there's probably you also need to do roughly the same amount of work if you want to analyze, say, the security of hash functions or block ciphers, right? So you have all these huge prerequisites you need to gather before you can do something useful. And then at the end, most likely you will not be able to produce any significant results. That's really, not a very bright future to me. So that's a big problem. So I'm not an expert on symmetric crypto, so I don't have any good suggestion off the top of my head. But I would like to perhaps use this platform to call for the kind of attention of the research, academic community in general, that we should really put more emphasis on failed results, on failures, because sometimes documenting how we fail. We've tried this idea, we've tried that idea, and why it didn't work. I think that's a valuable lesson to newcomers to the field. And we, as a tradition, we've downplayed that. We never put any emphasis on that, aside from some folklore, this being passed around under the table. But we should really look into that, because that's how a lot of problems are that hard, right? Really hard, and we just need more people to work on it. And given the current incentive system, motivation system in the academia, I just don't think that we will be able to produce that kind of, encourage that kind of research, like how to break hash functions on quantum computer. I know very little people working along this direction, precisely because it's so difficult. If you throw a PhD student on that, he or she will most likely end up spending a decade without producing any significant results. That's really sad. But we really need this kind of work.
This is an interesting point about research in general. In just about every field of research, if you get a result that's a failure, it's considered a failure. Whereas in cryptography, a failure is actually a success, because it demonstrates that something is robust against something.
Yes. Yeah, that's a very good point. So yeah, maybe we should encourage, as a crypto, academic community, we should encourage failure and set an example. Yeah.
Definitely, there's a lot of bug bounties, right, that companies have for security bugs and to release them. So it's a good field to start into. And yeah, just in general with industry, I think that's been the exciting part of the quantum ecosystem building up, where it's physicists used to sit in a lab with other physicists. And now we have cryptographers and people from very different fields coming in and actually talking to each other.
Exactly.
So, considering the global importance of all of this, these standards have enormous long-term forward value. And for cryptographic standards to really work in a global setting, they need to be standardized, they need to be open and transparent, widely accessible. How do you go about ensuring that that's the case with a new cryptographic protocol like Prion?
Right. I think NIST has started a very good job here. So they're doing a very good job here. They require all the submitters to disclose their kind of stake on their proposal, like intellectual properties and patents, what have you. And we follow that procedure. So we disclose everything that we are working on when it comes to Prion. And at the same time, we are a public company in Canada, so that also puts a lot of transparency requirement on us. So we're sticking to those rules. We're trying to be transparent, trying to be open. We open source everything, put up everything, publish everything on our website as soon as they are available. So I think following this spirit, I hope that we can at least convince the community that we're not putting any backdoor there to benefit ourselves in the future. I think that's what most people are doing. All these teams, where we're trying to stick to the rules that NIST set out. So we're trying to be as transparent as possible. I think that's really important, because we've seen in the past a few examples of how some institutions, some entities trying to sneak in some backdoor to some crypto standard. I think that's really the lesson we learned here. And I think we're doing a good job today.
You mentioned before that NIST is actually standardizing multiple protocols for digital signatures. What's the reason for standardizing multiple? And what's the motivation for that? What is it, because they have different use cases, or they have different advantages and disadvantages in different circumstances?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a major reason, because we don't have anything remotely as good as ECC. That's kind of very small, very fast. We kind of have algorithms that are good on some aspect, but a bit less than ideal on others. So that's a reason. I think that's one reason that NIST has selected multiple and planning to select more algorithms to do the same job, the digital signature, the key encapsulation. But I would say that in addition to that, I think security is also a concern, because many of these algorithms, they're relatively young. For example, lattice-based crypto, it's really been there maybe 20, 30 years top, right? But people really started working on this maybe in the last 20 years. Although there's a lot of smart people there, they did a lot of great work, they put in a lot of effort, but still I would say we don't yet have that kind of confidence that we had with these pre-quantum algorithms, right? So now that I guess NIST is a bit under some pressure from the White House, from various. There's some other considerations that they need to do this as soon as possible. So I guess it's also a strategy of diversification, not putting all the eggs in one basket kind of thought. So that's why I think we will end up with multiple, maybe half a dozen, if not more, algorithms to standardize.
I definitely wonder if this is going to affect security architecture generally. So I was thinking back to IOTA, the cryptocurrency. It was quantum resistance at first, but then there was a vulnerability in the system that was exploited. Everyone lost all their coins, and they moved back to the standard cryptography. And last I heard, they're still waiting for standards to be released. But I can see them being kind of skeptical for a while to upgrade. So do you think that this race is going to incentivize kind of faster, more flexible architecture, given that a lot of systems take a long time to upgrade and we might have multiple solutions?
Yes, absolutely. That's a very good observation. So I think that's what we call in this crypto community algorithm agility or crypto agility, which just means that especially in the face of challenges posed by large quantum computers, I think it's safe to say that nobody really knows what will happen, say 20 years from now, whether any of these algorithms will remain secure, or will some smart guy like Shor come along and break some of them. It's really hard to tell. So that's why we want to have multiple algorithms. So it's very unlikely that all of them will be broken by smart guys. I think that's a bit, I certainly don't believe that will happen. So that's one thing. And on the other hand, as you mentioned, so it's important to have this kind of scenario, the worst case scenario in mind, so that when we design our system, when we implement our system, we should keep in mind that first of all, we need to support multiple algorithms, and some of them might be broken in the worst case sometime in the future. So we need to have a mechanism to mitigate this kind of worst case situation, and that's crypto agility, algorithm agility. I think that's kind of a lot of people are now becoming more aware of this situation. I think that's going into a lot of new system designs. I think that's definitely a good thing, and we should encourage that kind of mentality. Yes.
So where is Prion at the moment? It hasn't yet been already used Prion, or is that something we have to wait for?
Sorry, I didn't get the.
Sorry.
Second.
So the question was, is Prion at a stage where it can already be used, or do we have to wait for standardization for this to become available?
That's a good question. So today we have everything released in open source to the general public. So if you're interested, you can definitely give it a try. You can even use it. We don't have any kind of we don't have any intellectual property claims on Prion, so it's free for everyone. But on the other hand, you will be using it on your own. You're taking a risk if you want to use Prion today, because it hasn't been standardized. It's still in the process. Most people expect there will be at least another year, maybe two, before we kind of know which additional algorithms will be selected. So yes, so the short answer is yes, you can use it today, but it's not a standard. So it's the reason. So if you want to use it, it's the same reason that you may use non-standard algorithm today. You use it at your own risk.
So the $1 million question then is, when should companies start thinking about upgrading to post-quantum cryptography?
That's indeed a $1 million question. So again, my view is heavily biased as a cryptographer, and also working in post-quantum crypto for longer than I would like to admit. I think I organized the PQC 2011 in Taipei.
Wow.
More than 10 years ago, and at that time, like immediate plan and action being taken, being considered by as many companies, by as many entities as possible, because it's really a very challenging problem. It's like you have to go into your house and replace all the pipelines, all the infrastructure, because it's there everywhere. Whenever you have some security protocols, you have some public key crypto there, you need to replace them. And plus, you're not going to have a drop-in replacement, so to speak. It's not like replacing these nuts and bolts there, and maybe there are hundreds of them in your household and you're done. No, it's not like that. You have to kind of redesign the piping system so that you will have algorithm agility, because first of all, it's not one algorithm, it's multiple, and second of all, some of them might be broken. So what's your plan if you need to replace some of that, say 5-10 years down the road? So it's really a lot of work. And even though we don't foresee like large quantum computers really showing up like tomorrow or next year, it's a good idea to start early, so that we when this kind of big breakthrough happens, as Gavin and Peter, they're really working hard to build all these secret large quantum computers. We want to be ready. We don't want to be surprised by them one day, tomorrow when we wake up. So I would say that it's today. So I think the best time is yesterday, but given that it's already passed, so we should really start today.
Yeah, there was just a paper published last week, which has the current record estimate for number of qubits to compute the discrete log for 256-bit elliptic curve, which is only 126,000 physical qubits, and it would break it in about 9 hours. So yeah, things are pushing up. Of course, in the field, we always feel like it's very slow, but yeah, it's a lot better than the talk of millions and millions of qubits.
Exactly.
So what are the plans for Preon's commercialization, and what kind of ongoing research are you doing?
That's also a very good question. So as a startup, we certainly would like to benefit from, to profit from Prion. But right now, to be honest, we don't yet have any concrete ideas. We just kind of doing the research work at this point. So if you have any good idea how to commercialize, how to profit from Prion. So please do let me know. I'm also curious. But having said that, we're putting in a lot of effort trying to, first of all, speed up Prion. So right now we only have a kind of a reference implementation that shows people how it works, but it's not yet optimized. So that's certainly on the top of our priority list. And we also want to analyze the algorithm more carefully, because it's compared with other digital signature scheme, Prion is a bit more complicated, because we kind of have potentially we can support more functionalities. So it's a more complicated algorithm, so that requires more analysis. So that's something we'd like the community to help as well. So that's why we participate in this PQC competition, hoping that some of them smart guys out there will catch some of the bugs here that we haven't considered. So far we're fine. So we're not among the 7 or 8 broken algorithms yet. No, knock on wood. But we really hope that the community can give us more feedback.
Yeah, I love that call to action. So one thing that we want people to do is start telling the world about your failures, all the challenges that you're doing, collaborating with others in the field. So Chen-Mou, thank you so much for coming on and answering all our questions about Prion, and Peter and Gavin for co-hosting in your amazing questions as well. I feel like I have 1,000 more questions, so hopefully we can talk about this more one day. But right now you can go see more information about Prion and downloading the source code even at prion.btq.com. And for everyone listening, subscribe to this podcast, listen to these episodes wherever you find your podcasts, and see you next time.